Hey, it's the gift that keeps on giving, Andy Bannister from Solus CPC. This time he wonders if Christianity is dying. And the answer is yes, but he's not going to believe it because he's got a vested interest in wanting it to stick around. But I don't really care about his emotional well-being. I care about what's actually true. So let's see what Andy is on about and why, no matter what he wishes was true, his precious religion is going the way of the dodo.
Is Christianity dying?
Yes, Andy, it is, at least in the first world. That's why many churches, especially the Catholic Church, are focusing their efforts on the third world, where people are not educated enough to know any better, where people don't have access to sources of information like the internet, so they can easily see what a load of nonsense your beliefs are. Because in the advanced world, your whole belief system, in fact the vast majority of belief systems that once held sway over the population, they're falling apart.
Well, if you believe some portions of the media, then the church is in terminal decline here in the UK and other parts of the West, and it's all doom and gloom and disaster. Is that true?
Yes, it is. In a poll conducted in 2016 in the UK, only 28% of the population said they believe in a god or a higher spiritual power, while 38% said they do not. Church membership has hemorrhaged from 10.6 million in 1930 to 5.4 million in 2013. And if nothing changes, by 2025, church membership will fall to an all-time low of 8.4% of the population. The evidence doesn't lie, Andy. Your beliefs are toast.
Well, the good news is actually no. And I first realised there was more to the story of the church in the UK when, after living for almost 7 years in Canada, my wife and I returned to the UK last summer, and I began to notice everywhere I looked, there were green shoots.
So, instead of paying attention to the actual evidence, you're going to select what you're going to pay attention to and ignore all the rest. And of course, that's confirmation bias, which should be no surprise at all.
So I'd visit churches from one end of the country to the other, and time again I'd hear the same story, from inner city Liverpool to the north of Scotland to people working with Iranians in East London. Churches were growing. Maybe not by thousands, but by hundreds, by tens, by dozens. Lots of things going on. Green shoots happening.
So why don't you give us that data, Andy? And I love how he keeps referring to increasingly diminishing returns. Not thousands, but hundreds, dozens, a few. And he keeps getting quieter and quieter as he goes along, because I think he's embarrassed by the whole thing.
Now, first I thought this was just me and perhaps the places I get to speak, but then I read a wonderful book written by a friend of mine called Sean Oliver D. It's called God's Unwelcome Recovery, and actually he digs into these church growth statistics and says if you ignore that's the mainstream churches, which is often where the media go to look at their church attendance figure, you actually see churches are growing everywhere. There's all kinds of things happening.
So what, you're talking about heretical churches? I mean, there are always churches that split off from other churches, but overall, Christianity is dying badly in the UK. There might be more individual churches with very few members, but that doesn't mean there are more members overall. And as I said before, Andy's going to try to spin things so it looks better from his perspective, not quoting any actual data, not looking at any actual studies, because he wants Christianity to be surviving better than it is. But if you actually look at the book he mentions, you find out that it's a very short work that reads more like a conspiracy theory that everyone's out to get Christianity, and that's why they're all just lying about the demise of the religion. But then Oliver D. gets ridiculously sidetracked by explorations of church funding and postmodernism, such that his entire premise spirals down in flames and really goes nowhere. Sort of like the majority of Andy's videos, now that I think about it.
But the reason he called his book God's Unwelcome Recovery, he wanted to push into why is it that this story is not more well known.
Because it's not true. But again, this is just confirmation bias at work. Oliver D. and Andy, why does that sound like Fibber McGee and Molly? Anyhow, they really want this to be true, so they look at certain statistics while ignoring others, specifically to get their beliefs and their desires to look more reasonable. Lies, damn lies, and statistics for people who've got no idea how to actually examine statistics.
Well, of course, the media don't want to tell the story that actually there is exciting things happening in the UK church. But more challengingly, it's also Christians at times. We love talking ourselves down. We love sitting in little circles telling ourselves Christian horror stories about how bad it is, rather than actually get out there and be part of what God is doing. Because one of the patterns is where you find churches where the gospel is preached, people's questions are taken seriously, there's a passion for evangelism, and they're involved actively in their communities. Time and time again, when those pieces are there, God shows up and growth happens.
Except you're still playing the conspiracy card. Oh yeah, the media wants to lie to everyone about what's going on. But it's not the media. It's actual statistics going on behind the scenes. The media is just reporting on things. They don't just make it up. But then he moves on to something I've pointed out before, the self-depreciating nature of religion, that people can never do anything right, that they will always screw up, and only God can do anything worthwhile. Way to play into the narrative, Andy.
But there's a bigger story even than this. When we talk about what God is doing and how the church is doing, it's very easy to focus on just the country that we're in. But when you draw the lens back and look globally, things are pretty incredible.
Not in the first world, because the same thing is happening everywhere throughout Europe, in Canada, in America, in Japan, in Australia, you name it. The only place that you're finding any significant growth of religion is in places where you crap behind a bush. Religion only works where ignorance reigns supreme.
Take China. Almost 150 million Christians in China. It's on track to become the world's most populous Christian country. Who would have thought that when back in the late 1950s and early 1960s, Mao's Cultural Revolution saw every Western missionary thrown out of China and Western Christians thought it was all over? Well, it isn't all over. God's doing an amazing work.
China has a population of 1.379 billion people. 150 million Christians is a very small percentage. In fact, 15% of Chinese are atheists, which means the number of atheists outnumber the number of Christians in your claim by more than 50 million. And I haven't been able to find any statistics which support his 150 million number. Most cite around 33 million Christians and 185 million Buddhists. I'm sorry if that's the best you can do, Andy. You're absurdly laughable.
Look, in Africa, there are now something like 450 million Christians in Africa today. It's predicted to be 630 million by 2025. That is up from 9 million in 1900. Absolutely phenomenal growth.
On a largely backward continent. And of course, he ignores the fact that the northern end of the continent is almost entirely Islamic, and in the countries that are Islamic, they are overwhelmingly Islamic in the high 90% range, whereas countries that are largely Christian are much less so. And again, he's spinning the data to support his contentions instead of looking at the actual facts.
Or look at the Middle East. A country like Iran has 1 million Christians now in the church. It's growing rapidly. Hundreds of thousands of Muslims, actually, in fact, across the Middle East coming to faith in Christ in the last few decades. God is doing an incredible thing.
Yeah, except he completely ignores the fact that 99% of Iranians are Muslim. Only 0.6% of Iranians are non-Islamic. And he also completely lies about the number of Christians in Iran, the vast majority of which belong to the Armenian Apostolic Church. Currently, it's estimated that between 300,000 and 370,000 Christians are in Iran, although I did see one estimate that places it closer to 500,000. No one says 1 million. No one.
And in fact, that global focus reminds me of something important.
That you can spin things however you want by only paying attention to the facts that are convenient and ignoring the ones that aren't?
You know, it's often interesting when we think about Christianity, we tend to think of it as a Western religion, but of course it isn't. It's a religion that you can't pin down geographically, and that makes Christianity unique.
No, it doesn't. But we can look at worldwide trends and find that, almost without exception, the most advanced nations, the most wealthy nations, they tend to be the least religious. The US is an exception at the moment, but you notice that most of the countries Andy's been talking about have been at the high end of the scale, the less successful, the less advanced, and the less prosperous nations, while everyone that actually makes a difference, where the discoveries and the developments are made, and oh yeah, where Andy lives and where he started off talking about, they tend to be the least religious out there and getting more and more and more secular as time goes by. Funny how that works.
You see, Islam, for all of its millions of followers, started in the Middle East and has remained largely Middle Eastern faith. It's an Arabic faith. Muslims pray in Arabic, they pray facing Mecca. In Saudi Arabia, they read their Quran in Arabic.
Well, if you ignore the fact that the most numerous Islamic country on the planet is in the Philippines, right? If you ignore all of Northern Africa, right? But shh, don't talk about those inconvenient facts.
Buddhism began in Asia. Asia is still the center of Buddhism.
Somewhat true, although there are lots of Buddhists out there. Heck, I was surprised that after I moved, there is a Buddhist temple about 5 miles from my house. But here's something else that Andy is ignoring. Buddhism isn't expansionistic. It's not a warring religion. It isn't traditionally spread by the sword, executing anyone who doesn't play along. It's kind of a Christian and Islamic thing.
Atheism, which functions like a religion for many people, is really a Western construction and remains so.
Yeah, not so much. In fact, when you get into the Far East, there are more atheists in a lot of places than there are religious folk. In fact, if you look at Japan, 31% of the population are confirmed and open atheists. Most of the rest ignore religion the vast majority of the year, only paying attention ostensibly on certain holidays. Yeah, atheism is West-centric, all right.
But Christianity has always transformed and moved across cultures. It began in the Middle East. It swept through the Roman Empire, 50% of the Roman Empire becoming Christian in the first 300 years, into India, across into North Africa, up into Europe, with the Pilgrim Fathers across into America. And now it's moving south and east again and becoming a Southern Hemisphere phenomenon. You can't pin Christianity down to one culture.
Well, that's because Christianity is a warring religion. It conquers and spreads like a virus. Its adherents are called to convert the world by force if necessary, and history has proven that it's often been necessary. Historically, it hasn't convinced people that it was true. It held the sword to their throat and demanded they adopt the religion or die. And apparently, Andy's proud of that.
Why? Well, because the beautiful thing about Christianity is it doesn't just transcend culture, it says something positive about culture.
Yeah, only if convert or die is something positive, which it's not.
Atheism really has no place for culture. At the heart of the atheistic message is reproduce and survive and pass your DNA on, job done.
There is no atheist message. Atheism isn't a religion. Atheism is dealing with reality. It has no message to pass on. Andy is a moron.
Islam, at the end of the day, brings an Arabic culture and squashes out the local cultures where it's been. But Christianity celebrates culture.
No. Christianity co-opts culture. That's where Catholicism got most of those saints. They swept in, took over, and stole local religious figures, making them into saints so the locals would have less of a problem staying in line. Come on, Andy. Learn some of your own history.
Because Christianity says that God invented culture. And if you read the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible, you see this beautiful picture of people from every tribe and every tongue and every language praising God. There is something beautiful in every culture.
Except for those people who refuse to toe the Christian line, who get to fry for all of eternity in a lake of fire. Funny how he ignores that part.
There is also something broken in every culture.
And we're back to the classic Christian line that we're all messed up and can do nothing right without his imaginary friend. Andy, you're a broken record that makes no sense at all.
It needs restoration and rescue as well, which is why God, in the person of Jesus, stepped in to culture, come in the flesh, that people from every tribe and every tongue and every nation might come to know saving faith in Jesus Christ.
You know, the more I listen to Andy here, the more insane he comes off. And if not insane, then dishonest. Because nobody can be that ignorant of the actual facts without either being dishonest or manipulative or completely blind. Or all three. But the more I watch Christian apologetics, and indeed all apologetics, the more I have to wonder if these people are unbelievably stupid and ignorant, or if they know that what they're spouting is absurd and they just do it anyhow. So I'm going to leave it to you to decide for yourself what you think Andy Bannister is. Is he really this stupid, or is he an accomplished liar for the Lord? You decide.
Everything changes.